Hello, welcome to Tape to Tape. I am your co-host, Ryan Dixon. My usual co-host, Rory Boylan, is away, so we're pleased to welcome Justin Bourne in today. Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You can find Justin every day on Sportsnet, The Fan 590, on Hockey Central, and you can find this man, Gare Joyce. Basically, just go out your front door. Gare's probably there working on a story. He is a features writer for Sportsnet.ca, and in addition to talking about the surprising Ottawa Senators with Wayne Scanlan and the resurgent Leafs, we want to talk about Akim Aliu, obviously the news of the week, and we found Gare because he's the perfect guy to speak to this topic. Gare wrote a feature about him that was released on Sportsnet.ca last February, and we should establish right away, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so we're going to stay as much as we can out of the minute-to-minute. We don't know exactly what will be going on with this situation involving Bill Peters and the Calgary Flames when people listen to this podcast beginning on Friday and moving forward from there. So, Gare, what we do want to talk about is what you have learned about Akim Aliu, a player you covered when he was an OHLer and got to know, talked a lot to people who were running the teams that he played for and the teams that were looking at drafting him in 2008. So let's go back to the early days of his OHL career. What was the book on this player when he was coming in as a high draft pick?
Well, he was a very, very talented minor midget player on a Marlies team that was with John Tavares, which was considered like one of the best teams to ever come out of Greater Toronto. They had, I guess, 5 players drafted in the top 10 of the OHL draft, and Sam Gagner wasn't one of them because he was going the NC2A route, evidently went and played in the USHL. So they were just a powerhouse. They didn't really lose a game all season long.
For people who, their reference point for Aliu right now is number one, probably the allegations he made on Twitter against Bill Peterson earlier this week, but also this incident that occurred, I want to say in the 05-06 season while he was a member of the Windsor Spitfires.
Correct.
How did it start and how did it grow?
Started on the team bus, hot boxing, like locking guys in the bathroom at the back of the bus, and Akim isn't somebody who tolerates stuff like that at all. And I got to know him back then, and I got to know friends that he grew up with. And Akim came to Canada from Mother Russia, and a guy who has Nigerian extraction and speaks fluent Russian. So he grew up in pretty tough circumstances.
How old would he have been when he came to Canada? Do you recall?
I want to say that he was around 10, 11. And he was a provincial level soccer player as well. Like he's a crazily gifted athlete. So he really took a lot of abuse from kids, racial epithets and things like that, and bullying in grade school. But after a while, they learned it doesn't really make sense to bully Akim Aliu, right? You come out on the wrong end of that. So when this went down in Windsor, most rookies, or probably all the other rookies, just sort of bit their tongue and sucked it up, and Akim just pushed back.
And we should mention the other name people would know who was involved in this incident, most prominently Steve Downey, who did go on to he was a first-round draft pick, played in the NHL, played at the World Juniors, and it was a couple weeks, if I have it correct, after Aliu refused to go along on the bus, that those two got into a fight at Spitz practice, and as you said, a local cameraman just happened to catch it, and people said, "What's going on with these two guys on the same team?"
It wasn't so much of a fight, I guess. It started with an assault, right? And Downey, like on a face-off drill or something like that, just cross-checked Aliu in the face, knocking out teeth. Aliu repaired to the dressing room to get treated, and then came back out on the ice, and that's when the fight started in earnest. The Spitfires, it was the fallout was swift and thorough. It ended up in a change of ownership, a change in coaching. Downey and Aliu were both traded. Somehow Aliu ended up getting suspended along with Downey. There was the police wanted to get involved. Aliu's father didn't want to do something that would put his son's career at risk, and he sort of identified this as something that maybe we should just back away and let the dust settle. The police were very, very interested in pursuing charges against Downey.
So Aliu's always kind of been at the center of these, like, I guess, hot button issues. Is he just had some bad luck to be in those circumstances, or is he? You said he's someone who pushes back quite a bit.
Yeah.
I know in the hockey circles, it's really hard to push back against the veteran guys on the team. And to be the type of guy as a young player who would do that speaks to the type of guy he is, which is someone who's not going to take the, that sort of abuse laying down, which kind of speaks to, where we are at now, right? Is that fair to connect the two things and say, what we're seeing from him now is kind of always who he's been?
Oh, I think that's fair. Akim isn't one to not speak his mind. Mm-hmm. He's not one to sort of do something to create an impression. He generally goes through life without a filter. If he says something, he means it. I was telling Sobolski on radio yesterday, or day before yesterday, do you talk to Akim Aliu? Well, I've talked to him every week since like 2007, right? And sometimes more than every week, and at times daily since then. And like we've always gotten along, and I take Akim completely as he is. An absolute truth teller. He will speak to power, and he will state his case.
I want to throw this one out to you, Justin, given your extensive background playing pro hockey and around the game very recently with the Leafs organization. How important or how quickly do you think things are going to change in rooms in terms of, I feel like, we're going back really not that long ago to 2005, 2010. It just really felt like at that time there was an expectation of conformity and that everyone in a room, hockey, whatever sport, was going to be, the expectation was you would be molded into the same thing and kind of, you would conform to that. And I think what we're learning more and more now is that people are different and they have different experiences and they have different personalities. And I think we can safely say there's more attention being paid already to communication between players and coaches, but how much of an emphasis do you think there's going to be put on, if you're in charge of 20 men or women on a sports team, you're going to have to learn how to deal with them as individuals and not expect that you can kind of, like I said, fit them all into the same mold.
Yeah, well, that's been a hallmark of hockey culture is not, we wouldn't term it, or they wouldn't have termed it conformity so much as just, falling in line.
Yeah.
Or, everyone was expected to behave the same way, and that was celebrated, right? If you were someone who could fall in step with the group. It's hard because part of being a big team is you kind of need everyone pulling the same direction. So it's nice to know that you can anticipate certain behavior from certain players and ideally from everyone. So I understand why that's been a thing in the past, but when it's been used, in a negative sense, and often that has created a power structure, right? That interest in everyone doing the same thing has created a power structure that has been too easy to abuse and exploit. And I do think that if nothing else, this should cause people within hockey to really audit their own behavior and how much they're using that power structure for good and to get the team doing the same thing and pulling in the same direction, and how much it is being abused. Because I remember thinking back to the years you're talking about with Aliu, and I went to university 03 to 07, and that was kind of the death of hazing, was right around that time, where it was like, are we going to have to do what those rookies had to do? Some incidents had come out that were cast in a really negative light. And the problem with hazing, aside from all the obvious things, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, and all the negative things that came with it, was that it set the bar so low for acceptable behavior that anything you did after that was seemed okay. Obviously that's okay, because look what if they're allowed to do X to us, well, obviously this is okay. So eliminating hazing was kind of the first step in eliminating the abuses of power, I think, and that was a good start. But we're just seeing more and more today. These sort of incidences, I think, are going to push us in a direction that makes everyone feel safer and better. And frankly, that's going to encourage better hockey and happier people. And, there are going to be uncomfortable times on the walk there. And this certainly seems like one of those times. It's going to be difficult for some people. And a lot of times it's going to be difficult, but justifiably so.
Gare, do you think, given you're a hockey lifer, does it feel like we're at a real moment of reckoning in terms of, in most basic terms, how we've done things before and how they need to be done now?
I thought you were going to say, are you a hockey end-of-lifer? I would love to be optimistic about it. I'm not particularly optimistic about it. No,
That's refreshing, to be honest.
Yeah. I think I really don't know that this is going to turn out to be a teachable lesson. I think it runs too deep. I think, are things better now than they were? I guess,
Yes.
Yeah. But are they really good, or is it well, I don't know about that. And I also think, though, that it was interesting talking to Akim. Nothing like this happened when he was with the Marlies. At that level.
As a teenager, to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah, right. As a 14, 15-year-old. He found that just the most positive culture that he'd ever encountered in hockey. And I get one of the other things that I should say in the buildup of who Akim is. When his family first came to Canada, they were poor, right? He was skating in borrowed equipment and secondhand. He didn't know what it was like to have new skates. When he's playing for a Marlies team that's running roughshod over the GTHL. He was able to benefit from the kindness of strangers on a lot of count, and the kindness of teammates, And so talking about the homogeneous, good in the room, and it's why what you want everyone to fill a cookie cutter or something like that. So Akim is just like your average Nigerian Russian.
Yeah.
He has a different background than other people.
Yeah.
And I think, I honestly think that maybe, I want to say, this is probably a generational thing. I think that it's not necessarily that the coaches are better the higher up the food chain that you move. And in fact, the higher that you move up the food chain, the more coaches' ambitions have sort of grown and festered.
Sure.
In the case of some.
Sure.
And, with the Marlies, he had the Marlies minor midget team. He had a volunteer coach who had no ambitions
Not
to go
thinking about
farther.
the next move to make himself a millionaire.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. And you encounter a minor league coach, right? And people would say, "Oh yeah, Akim was trying to make the NHL from an AHL team." Well, news, right? The coach wanted to make the NHL too, right? And when you have ambition like that, there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be tempers boiling over, and I think that in pressure situations, and I mean, you can say it's minor league, it's not the NHL. In fact, it's sort of a more pressurized situation, because you're not just trying to beat the other team, you're trying to beat someone on your own team.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a major undersold part of the minors, by the way, is
Yeah.
that your competition is not those guys on the other side. It's that guy beside you in his stall.
Yes.
That's your direct competition.
Yeah, and for coaches, sort of the same deal. And you want to be moving up in your minor league system. I mean, wherever you have, and hockey's full of it, right? There are all, and you can go to hockey parenting or whatever. But where you have money and ambition, you're going to have some people doing bad things.
Sure.
Right. And you're going to have some distortion of values. Right. And I mean, I think that, and Akim would tell you that he made mistakes along the way. When he ended up in London, later on, he went from Windsor to Sudbury, then to London Knights. I think that he felt like he made mistakes along the way, but he was learning not just to play hockey. He was trying to make his way in a culture, where everyone else had a head start, right? And I mean, he was translating for his mother. Like he had some real life concerns.
No doubt.
That, sons of NHLers, right? Second generation professional athletes, they had a perspective that they could bring to it that Akim couldn't. If you're expecting him to seamlessly fit in, that's a pretty big ask.
Well, we'll leave it there. It's an important discussion. I anticipate we're going to be having many more of these in the coming days, probably weeks and years. But Gare, thanks
Not
so much.
tomorrow, okay?
We'll take
tomorrow.
a little break. But
Yeah.
thanks for sharing a bit about Akim's story and enlightening our listeners in terms of what this guy has been through a little bit in life. Justin's going to stick around. We got a couple more segments here on Tape to Tape. We're going to talk a little bit about the resurgent Leafs, and then we're going to bring Wayne Scanlan in to talk about the surprising Senators. Stick around for that. Ahead, right here on Tape to Tape. Hey, welcome back to Tape to Tape. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a very good chance you are into fantasy hockey. If that is the case, make sure to sign up for the Sportsnet Fantasy Hockey Pool presented by RAM. Check it out at sportsnet.ca/RAM. You can win all kinds of prizes, $50,000 in cash, a 2020 Ram 1500 Sport. That sounds pretty sweet. Justin, are you into fantasy hockey?
I would be, but I don't have enough friends to be. I used to play when I worked at another sporting place of sorts.
They exist?
They
I didn't
do
know that.
But these days I'm having to. I don't want to play with just anyone. I like to play with friends, and other people are just competitive and will play with anyone. I'm waiting to get invited by the good people at Sportsnet.
Yes. Well, we might be able to work on something there. You want to play with people who you can interact with every day and hold it over their head when you outsmart them.
It's all about vengeance for me in the
awesome.
end. Yes.
All right. If you're into fantasy sports at all, here's my advice for you right now. Pick up a Toronto Maple Leaf, because Justin, they're scoring goals now. Yeah. We are 3 games in as we record this. Just give me your impressions of life under Mr. Keefe.
Well, it certainly looks different, doesn't it?
does.
It looks peaceful and relaxed, and like the players are having a good old time.
And you know what? I want to jump in right here because I've been saying this to anyone I've been involved in these conversations with. Like, even as someone who I grew up playing hockey, I obviously watch it very close. Like, when people talk about a coach coming in, he's going to tweak the system and change this, change that. I'm always like, yeah, but it's not like I'm going to watch the TV and just be like, oh my God, they're playing completely differently.
4
like,
forwards and 1 defenseman.
Yeah, exactly. Like Sheldon Keefe is still saying, hey guys, you got to back check.
Yeah.
He still wants them to be hard on the puck and hard on guys. But what I think I and everyone can relate to is people waking up and being like, I'm excited to go to work.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's what's going on.
Yeah, I talked with Anthony Stewart about this a little bit on Hockey Central, where he was saying that if you have to be at the rink 2 hours before a game, that's pretty standard in all levels of pro hockey. And when things are going bad, you show up 2 hours and a minute before, it's one of those things. But when things are great and you like being at the rink, you're there 3 hours earlier. And then, you're kind of talking with your buddies and joking around and going, hey, by the way, did you see me open last game? I've been open, and you end up kind of talking about things, conversations you wouldn't have when you show up later. Like, winning breeds winning for so many reasons, and I also just think you buy into the system more, which means you play it, better, which means you're more likely to win again, and it's just so I guess cyclical, or I guess a better example, it's just a snowball down a hill, and it really seems to be building for Toronto right now.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, you look at, even just here in Canada in the Atlantic Division, like before Babcock got fired, we were literally sitting here talking about the Leafs maybe missing the playoffs, and like teams are maybe calling about Tyson Barrie, and the Montreal Canadiens were off and rolling, and now, a week and change later, they've lost 5 in a row as we record this. They host the Devils on Thursday night, and the Leafs are, flying, and Tyson Barrie scores every time he goes out there. I mean, it would seem that this change has impacted Barrie the most, but are there a couple other guys that kind of spring to mind as well that you think are maybe set to thrive in the new reality?
Yeah, for sure. I just to bring it back to the big picture of like how quickly things change. It's insane. It was like a week ago that this Leafs team was awful and being sold for parts, and Tyson Barrie is a great example. I remember being like, who would trade for him? And now it's like, why would you trade Tyson Barrie? I'm just thinking of the Dallas Stars at one point, like they're going to fire Jim Montgomery, and someone mentioned him for Coach of the Year today.
Oh man, yeah.
So things do swing really quick. In terms of individuals who it could be swinging for, the name that we talked about today is Willie Nylander. Just someone who thrives when he has the puck, thrives when the Leafs have the puck. He does not thrive at getting it back, which, his coach would encourage him to do after the game against Detroit. Keefe said, he said, what I liked about Willie is, him getting the puck back. So he still wants to build those habits, to your point, but they're going to have the puck more, and he's someone who just excels with it. So Nylander, Barrie, those are both good picks. Maybe a guy like Travis Dermott, even Ilya Mikheyev, but the guys that want to play the skilled puck possession game for sure.
He made an interesting point on radio that I want you to repeat here.
Yes.
That the knock, I guess you would say, on the Keefe Dubas teams have been that because they have these talented guys who have the puck, they eviscerate the low caliber opponents, but against teams that are going to have the puck more, the Boston Bruins, that sort of club, that's still the great unknown as to will the team have enough, I guess, oomph, for lack of a better term, to get that thing back so they can start dancing around again.
Yeah, well, the only reason, for that is when you're playing the lesser teams and you can skate around them and have the puck, and we talk about this puck possession game where instead of just chipping it in, they're actually running the puck back and coming back together and moving forward, organized as a group. The problem is when you can't get the puck back from the other team, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
So the Boston Bruins are, a great puck possession team, and when Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak are out there, you don't get to come back and regroup and have a good old time because you're in your end.
Yeah.
So certainly it's great against teams like Detroit. That was ugly last night. But it's going to be a bigger challenge against those better teams. So, they've won a Calder Cup, Dubas and Keefe, using this system. It does give them the advantage, and you can win doing it. So they've proven that it is possible. At the NHL level against the best teams, it's yet to be proven, but they haven't had a crack at it yet. So for me, that's just the question mark. Can it work against the good teams too?
Well, fair to say the Leafs all kind of look like they have a new lease on life. Happy days have returned to Toronto. Happy days somewhat anyways in Ottawa. That team doing a little better than some expected, especially in recent weeks. We are going to bring in Wayne Scanlan, Sportsnet contributor, and talk about those plucky Sens. Remember that? Find out what's been working in Ottawa and what the future might hold for this team that has a lot of prospects. Stick around for that on the other side of the break here on Tape to Tape. This segment brought to you by Subway. Subway now delivers, no joke. Time now for our overtime segment brought to you by Subway. No joke. Subway now delivers. Joining us this time, we have reached him in Ottawa. He is Sportsnet contributor Wayne Scanlan. Wayne, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are great, and we want to know what has been at the secret of, I think we'll just go ahead and call it success for the Ottawa Senators, at least in November. I believe even if they lose their last game of the month, they're going to end November with a .500 record in the month. I think it's safe to say that's a little better than most people were expecting. We know about Pageau. We know about Anthony Duclair, and we want to talk about those guys a little later on. But big picture, what's been going right in Ottawa?
Yeah, you're so right about the great month of November, and it's kind of a horrific schedule because they had 16 games in 28 days, and 11 of those on the road. But DJ Smith has really got the team playing well. You mentioned the record at one point it was 8-4 in the month of November until the last two games they've lost by one goal to Columbus and to Boston, and they could have won both of those games. So you can look at this team, if they could score, they'd be dangerous because DJ Smith has them playing aggressive, up tempo, and surprisingly defensively responsible hockey.
Do you anticipate them being able to, I guess, keep this up over the course of the season? Like going into the year, I think a lot of us believe the Senators were, headed straight for the basement. But this looks like a competitive team that every night is not giving you a free 2 points. Is this sustainable, or do you think they've been kind of playing above their talent level so far?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, isn't it? And we're not sure, what's going to be done. What's Pierre Dorion, the general manager, going to do between now and the trade deadline? I mean, does he sign Gabriel Pageau, who's having a career year? What about Anthony Duclair, who's an RFA, well-traveled at age 24, but he's had a great year as well. So it's kind of questionable what the lineup is going to look like as the season progresses. But I think the consistent factor has been the way the team plays for DJ Smith. He set the tone early when, he showed an ability to sit very expensive players, Bobby Ryan and Mikhail Bodker, not afraid of sitting veteran players that are earning a lot of money, basically saying, I'm going to play the fastest and the hardest working 20 players I have. They've had players up and down from Belleville that have just stepped in and not missed a beat. The lines have changed through injuries and call-ups and what have you. But again, they're playing that aggressive, up-tempo style. They're on the forecheck. They're physical. They're among the top hitting teams in the NHL. And I don't see that changing.
Do you think when it comes to Pageau, I mentioned him, you mentioned him, we have to talk about this guy who is, he's been a good player in the past, but he's obviously gone to a different level. I don't think anyone thinks he's about to turn into a 40-goal scorer at age 27, but he's always been a very solid two-way guy who could chip in on offense. He is, of course, a local boy. Given everything the Sens went through last year and in the past couple seasons, is there some optics being considered here? Would there be something symbolic about signing this guy to a long-term extension?
Yeah, I think so. And yet, as much as fans love him, fans here are very savvy and they understand that it would be great to keep Gabriel Pageau. He's a great two-way player, and we haven't even talked about his playoff pedigree. He's been a very good playoff performer, especially when the opposition is the Montreal Canadiens, because he's a renowned Habs killer.
He is.
His numbers against the Habs are outrageous. But, where is he going to slot in down the road? The Senators have a lot of good prospects in Belleville. They have 5 draft picks in the first 2 rounds next year, including the San Jose Sharks draft pick. And the Sharks have gotten hot lately, but there was a while when it was looking like, they could have a couple of lottery picks there, and then they still could, having their own pick in San Jose's. So, down the road, where does Pageau slot in? At what price point, and for how many years? So, I think all of this has to be weighed in. And then there's the player himself. Does he want to go to a contender? Does he want to go somewhere where he can get maybe a little more value? Maybe another team willing to slot him in as a second or third line center. Here, he's at best, I think, third line center down the road as Logan Brown matures, and Josh Norris and some of the other centers in the organization, and perhaps one or two draft picks from next year probably slot in ahead of Pageau. So it gets a little bit tricky for Dorion.
So, again, forecasting long-term for the Senators' future, how soon can this Senators team really be competitive? Obviously, this season, they're overachieving and they're in the fight every night, but they're probably not a legitimate playoff team. And if they are, they're probably not a cup contender. But you can see the pieces there between, the Tkachuk and Shabbat, and they're even Colin White's a nice player, and the players they have in the American League. How soon do you think that this team can have a realistic core and a chance to compete and make playoffs and start to make a push?
Yeah, I think we're looking at 2 or 3 years down the road. Who knows who the goaltender is going to be at that point? Right. Craig Anderson, unrestricted free agent. He's on the IR, by the way, and while he's making the trip, he's not available this weekend, and so Marcus Hogberg has been called up. Anders Nilsson has been a tremendous acquisition, and a great move to sign him before the year started, and for him to carry forward. He's played out of his mind and is a big factor in the Sens' success. But, how does the rest of the lineup shake up down the road? I think a lot of their really good young players, like a Balcers and Abramov, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, it just goes on and on. They've got Alex Formenton. They're all ranging between 20 and 22. So, I think you've got to give those guys a couple of years to develop, both down in Belleville and up here in Ottawa, and then see who gets added into the mix. But I think the overall, the youthful core of the team means it's going to be, that window to succeed is a little bit farther down the road than it is for some other teams.
You mentioned the new coach, DJ Smith, of course, a former Leafs assistant. Not often you see a team incorporate 4 players from a division rival into its lineup, but people in the city we're in here in Toronto would love to know, be very curious, I think, to know, how's Connor Brown look? What's up with Nikita Zaitsev, Tyler Ennis, Ron Hainsey? How have these guys integrated in different ways into this team?
Well, they've all been pretty good, actually. Connor Brown, if he could score at all the breakaways that he generates, he'd really be something. He'd be leading the division in scoring, I think. But he's certainly getting the opportunities. And I think if I can make a general comment about the 4 of them, they've added a lot of grit and heart to this team. And, looking down at Southern Ontario and some of the mayhem that's going on with the Leafs, part of that has been associated with a lack of grit and hustle. And I think they miss a Tyler Ennis, and I think they miss a Connor Brown, much as I understand how they had to move on with their cap issues and everything else. But Ron Hainsey has been good. Zaitsev's been good. Hainsey, of course, is charged with bringing along Eric Brandstrom. He started the season at 19 years of age. He just turned 20. And Hainsey's his sidekick. And I think, the experience that he has in the league has been invaluable for a young guy like Brandstrom to learn as he goes. So I think they've all fit in very well. I think Zaitsev, he took a lot of heat in Toronto, much as Cody Ceci did here. And here he's escaped criticism. I mean, he's been pretty solid. He's not overly flashy, but pretty solid defensively and contributes a little bit offensively. So he's been okay.
Keeping things on the back end there, last night Thomas Chabot scored just an exceptional goal as a defenseman up on the rush, just kind of doing things that you don't see defensemen do all that often. And being that he's, I would say he's 20 years old or somewhere around there right now. Just curious if you could tell us a little bit more about him. He's playing, I think, 25 minutes a game right now for Ottawa, and I'm never sure if that's a matter of necessity because they don't trust other people or if they love Chabot that much. So if you just tell us a little bit about him and how valuable he's been to Ottawa this season.
He's been good, but he signed that 8-year extension, $64 million, and I think early on he's been trying to live up to that contract. He's a great kid. He's very humble. You watched him on that play last night. He is silky smooth, just a beautiful and an effortless skater. I think he's going to be fine. But probably the biggest problem with Chabot this year, it's not his ice time and not so much his defensive play, but he's the quarterback of the league's worst power play. And I don't think he can escape that. And I think he's putting pressure on himself to score. He has a couple of goals. He has, I think, 4 goals, but including that beauty last night. But he's yet to score on the power play. He's got 3 goals. Sorry. So I think he'd like to score a bit more. But that 9% power play is really held the team down. If they just scored occasionally on that power play, they'd be a playoff team right now.
Yeah.
All right, Wayne, we will get you out of here on this one. I mean, we all know it was bleak for a couple years in so many ways there. Just very simply, how's the mood? I mean, you mentioned it is a savvy fan base, and on one hand, this is a team you could get excited about. On the other hand, there are still so many unresolved issues in terms of long-term future viability, still some attendance issues. I'm just curious what the vibe is around this team that is sort of outstripping expectations right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are waiting in the wings, but I think probably the best way to put it is they are slowly warming up to this team. I mean, Brady Tkachuk is, he's such a fan favorite. He plays with so much heart and gusto, and fans are going to love him. But I think there's still some concern about ownership. People are upset that there's no ability to move downtown when the door was open for this team to move to a new downtown arena. That's out the window for now. 13,000 plus to see the Boston Bruins last night, and that was one of the better crowds of the year. So there's a long way to go, but I think as these young players come in and progress, I think fans are really going to warm up to this team.
Yeah, on the ice at least there's something to put your arms around there for sure, and some real building blocks for the future. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure, guys.
That is Wayne Scanlan. He is a Sportsnet contributor. Thanks so much to Wayne for joining us today. Very special thanks to this man, Justin Bourne, for joining us as well on a day that Rory couldn't make it. Thanks to everyone tuning in to the Tape to Tape podcast, checking us out on YouTube. Make sure you're going to sportsnet.ca all the time for all your hockey info. Make sure you're checking out Justin on Hockey Central every day, noon till 2 o'clock. And make sure you check back next week for more glass rattling hockey action right here on Tape to Tape.